Dr. Pranavan Yoganathan. Low carb, high protein, moderate fat diet seems to remove oxidative stress the best. Annotated, summarized. Please share with a loved one.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Sean. I think the first step to getting off the proton pump inhibitors, proton pump inhibitors don't treat the reflux. They basically reduce the acidity of the refluxate. You're still reflux. It's not as acidic, hence not as irritating. It doesn't fix the fundamental problem, which is an issue related to motility and also diaphragmatic weakness, which then leads to things like high descending. The diaphragm is this really important muscle that pinches around your stomach and maintains it. But we've got this diaphragmatic sarcopenia in the modern world, that second valve that pinches around the stomach's lost. So I think the key step is to get off the proton pump inhibitors. It's actually not that difficult to do. I think once you start dropping a little bit of visceral fat and reducing the foods that ferment, the reflux actually improves relatively quickly. So once the proton pump inhibition is stopped, once the channel blockade is stopped from that drug, the acid secretion does improve. But you're absolutely spot on with regards to acid production reducing in the elderly. That's unfortunately an inevitable process of aging. With regards to the hydrochloric acid supplements, the data is very mixed on it. Sean, I personally haven't used it. I do my best to get people off proton pump inhibition. I've found that to be sufficient for most. With regards to pancreatic supplementation, there's a lot of data for that. If you've got pancreatic insufficiencies, I think the lipases are very, very efficient. You can have pancreatic insufficiency in a variety of disease states. It can be easily measured. I think some people are utilizing these pancreatic lipases without indication. But you can do a fecal test to check if you've got pancreatic malabsorption, and it generally happens in disease states where the pancreas is compromised. Usually we see it in people that have consumed a lot of alcohol over the years. I look at aging as essentially oxidative stress over the years. We are all prone to oxidative stress, and we must inevitably age. We can't live forever, but you're absolutely right. Like if you're on a diet and on an exercise regime that minimizes oxidative stress, and we can measure this, things like high sensitivity CRPs, LDL subfractions to see if your LDL is an oxidative particle. We tend to see people on these low carbohydrate, high protein, moderate fat diets tend to have very little oxidative stress. Most of them, right? It's very reduced levels of oxidative stress. So if you're not generating these free radicals, then you're preserving a lot of these cells a lot better, whether that's gastric acid producing cells or your colonocytes. I think it's like anything else. If you're utilizing your stomach acid and there's a reduction of these reactive oxidation species, you're going to preserve it a lot longer.
Definitions. Pancreatic lipase. A water-soluble enzyme secreted by the pancreas to break down lipids in the intestines. C-reactive protein. Liver-produced protein sent into the bloodstream in response to inflammation. LDL subfractions. Pattern A, large, buoyant particles. This indicates good health. Pattern B, small, dense particles, associated with cardiovascular and diabetes risk. Question: how to treat acid reflux? First step, get off the proton pump inhibitors. They do not treat the reflux. They simply reduce the acidity of the reflux state. You are still reflux. The fundamental problem: motility in the gut and diaphragmatic weakness. Diaphragmatic sarcopenia, the second valve that pinches around the stomach, is lost. The key step, get off the proton pump inhibitors. It's not that difficult to do. Simply drop some visceral fat and reduce the foods that ferment. Once the inhibitors are dropped, stomach acid does improve. Acid production does slow down in the elderly. I don't recommend supplements, however. Just getting people off of the proton pump inhibitors works. For pancreatic insufficiency, this can be checked with a fecal test. It's usually seen in people with alcohol misuse. Pancreatic lipase can be effective. I look at aging as essentially oxidative stress over time. Unless you're on a diet and exercise regime that minimizes oxidative stress. This can be measured. Sensitive CRP, C-reactive protein test, or LDL subfractions. It checks the LDL. Is it an oxidative particle? People on low-carb, high-protein, moderate-fat diets tend to have very little oxidative stress. If they're not generating free radicals, this is preserving the cells much longer, including gastric acid-producing cells and colonocytes.